Hello, everyone, and welcome to KDEL Leadership's demonstration of two advanced project management techniques for maximizing outcomes, namely network diagramming and analysis, as well as resource leveling best practices. I'm Dr. KD Ewulu, lead coach at KDEL Leadership, and I am an adjunct professor of organizational leadership and project management. Thank you for joining me from all over the globe. I'm honored to have you all. I will start with a project management quote from KDEL. It goes this way: trying to manage a project without project management is like trying to play a football game without a game plan. Having said that, our task today will be to utilize a fictional work breakdown structure to model the creation of a Gantt chart, to calibrate a forward pass, a backward pass, slack, a critical path, critical tasks, to review a resource allocation guideline, and to learn some resource leveling techniques such as fast tracking and crashing. We're going to conclude with a demonstration of the intricate steps that project managers go through as they level their resources during the implementation stage of project delivery. Finally, next steps for you all will be recommended to close out this 1 hour fast-paced event. So let us begin. And again, I'll give you a reason why project management has come to stay in the operations affairs of organizations. This quote is mine. Deploying project management methods into your organization will help you get a full year's value out of a week. A PMO is a great start. Of course, today we're only studying component methodology that PMOs utilize, which is network diagrams and optimum resource usage. Let's start by reviewing a fictional list of tasks, their durations, and their relationships with each other. This, as most of us on this call know, is termed a work breakdown structure, WBS. For the purposes of this presentation, I have labeled these 10 activities from A to J and identified their predecessor activities. That is, activities that must be completed before the next ones can begin. These are presented on the second column. The matrix is completed on the third column with the duration for each activity or task. For example, activity B can be completed in 4 weeks, while activity H is slated for completion in 6 weeks. Again, as most of you know, the Gantt chart is derived from the work breakdown structure. And it really is a horizontal histogram that shows the durations of each task and their relationships with each other, as depicted by the red links on this slide. A closer look at the chart reveals that activities B, C, and D cannot begin until activity A is completed. And likewise, for example, activity H cannot start until activity F is completed. The red arrowed links depict this information, which is derived from the predecessor list of activities shared on the previous WBS slide. Finally, take notice that activity G cannot start until activities C and D are completed. Again, This is derived from the WBS shared on the previous slide. We now move on to the network diagramming and precedence page. Each block you see now represents an activity, and the numbers at the bottom and center of each block represent the duration of the activity. The thick red arrows show which activity must be completed before the next one begins. And as you can decipher, activities B, C, D cannot start until activity A is done. Activity E can only be started when activity B is done. Activity F can only be started when activity C is done. Activity G can only be started when activities C and D are done, and on until you arrive at the last activity J, which can only be started when activities H and I are completed. Once you understand this, we can go on to our first steps in calculating slacks, which involve forward and backward passes. The forward pass takes us from the first activity to the last, from the left to the right. I want you to pay particular attention to the triangles, to the green triangles, to the green arrows that form a triangle in each box. The forward pass is calculated on the understanding that when you add the duration of a task to the early start date, you arrive at the early finish date. This sequence is depicted, as I said, by the green arrows that you observe. As you can see, activities B, C, and D can only start when activity A is completed. So after 2 weeks, which is the end date for completing activity A, activities B, C, and D can begin. Now, if you look at the top left corner of activities B, C, and D, they all have the same number, which is 2. This means they begin after week 2 when activity A is done. To continue on this forward pass, activity B, for instance, has a duration of 4 weeks. So it will be completed by the end of week 6, which is 2 plus 4, right? Activity C has a duration of 3 weeks, so it will be completed by the end of week 5, which is 2 plus 3. And activity D, which has a duration of 2 weeks, will be completed by the end of week 4, which is 2 plus 2. This sequence is repeated for all the activities going forward until we arrive at the last activity, which we all can see is activity J. Now, there's a rule I want to share here with you all. If 2 activities must be completed before a subsequent activity can begin, such as we observe with activity H. If you look here, activities E and F must be done before H can start. Then the later completion time takes precedence. Okay? In this case, because activity E is completed by the end of week 9, and activity F is completed by the end of week 11, then we're going to transfer the later completion time from activity F to activity H's early start time. This is why activity H starts on week 11 and not on week 9. For this small project, the scheduled completion date is at the end of 22 weeks, which is the early finish date for activity J. Now we're going to reverse and do what we call the backward pass. This helps us identify the values of the late start and late finish dates. And we're going to work backwards this time from activity J back to activity A. We're going to be focusing on the bottom rung of each activity box, where the horizontal backward green arrows are placed. So if you start from activity J and subtract 5 weeks, which is the duration of activity J, if you subtract the 5 weeks from 22 weeks, which is the total duration of the entire project, you arrive at 17 weeks. This is the late start. Now we're going to transfer 17 weeks to the late finish boxes of activities H and I, and then perform the backward subtractions again. You obtain 17 take away 6, which equals 11 weeks for activity H, and 17 take away 5, which equals 12 weeks for activity I. Repeating the same process gives you all the late finish and late start dates for all the activities until you get back to activity A. Now, once you're done with this, we have all the information we need to calculate the slack of each activity. Slacks are defined as the buffer each activity has, meaning the maximum amount of time that can be wasted, that is allowed to be frittered away or focused on other activities without undermining the completion date of the entire project. Let me say that again. A slack is defined as a buffer that each activity has, meaning the maximum amount of time you can expend without undermining the completion date of the entire project. It means the excess time each activity has to play around with. So, activity slacks are calculated by subtracting the top right numbers from the bottom right numbers, or the top left numbers from the bottom left numbers. A note of warning here, they should normally be the same, as can be evidenced from the slide you are currently viewing. In this fictional project, all the numbers in red font are the slacks for each activity. Once the slacks are identified, we're able to calculate the critical path. Now let's define the critical path a little bit. The critical path is a path where you have the least slack values. In this case, zeros in red font, or the longest possible path from start to finish, which is calculated by adding up the task durations along each path. In this example, there are 4 paths. A, B, activities A, B, E, H, J, which comes to, that path comes to 20 units, 20 weeks. Activities A, C, F, H, J, this comes to 22 weeks. Activities A, C, G, I, J, which comes to 20 units, 20 weeks. Activities A, D, G, I, J, which comes to 19 weeks. The path with the zeros and the path with the longest duration often coincide, as you can see here. This path, which is activities A, C, F, H, J, is therefore called the critical path, as depicted with the red arrows on the screen. Now, once we've identified the critical path, it's very easy to identify critical activities, meaning those activities that have absolutely no room for any slip-ups with regard to cost, time, or level of quality. In this example, the critical activities are those with zero slacks, which are activities A, C, F, H, G. As you can see there, I kind of grayed out the other activities to accentuate the critical path and the critical activities. Activities A, C, F, H, G, connected by the big red arrows. Now, before we launch into resource allocation, I want to share another quote, this time from Ralph Waldo Emerson with you. He says that, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there's no path and leave a trail. Let me say that again. Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there's no path and leave a trail. So, do not be afraid of the unknown during project implementation. The universal solution to unknown challenges hinges on our ability as project managers to blaze new trails, to travel paths that others less gifted fear to travel upon, and to manufacture workable solutions where there seemed to be no way out initially. So this brings us to the absolutely crucial assignment of allocating resources to tasks based on the criticality of the tasks. There are several guidelines that should be followed to achieve this goal. Number one, you want to identify the critical tasks. Number two, you want to assign the critical tasks to team members who are, first of all, competent and whose schedules are open for the duration of the tasks. It doesn't make sense to give a job to somebody who doesn't have an availability on their schedule. Number three, you want to discuss the final expectations with team members and confirm their willingness to handle the critical tasks, as well as their ability, their availability during that period of task execution. You want competent and available resource personnel to handle your critical tasks. You want to also assign other less critical tasks to team members who might be away for some time during the task execution period, okay? Ensure their period of absence is not as long as the prescribed slack for that particular task. So if you have a slack of 2 weeks, you want to ensure that whoever you assign that task to is not going to be away during the execution of that task for more than 2 weeks. That means even if they're not there for 2 weeks, that task can still be concluded on time. You want to also stay in touch and in good relations with functional managers. I say that because they have more control over your team members. They're in the position to augment your team membership, especially if your schedule is slipping or contingency situations arise. You want to balance the matrix for best results. What do I mean by that? A balanced matrix in project management, as some of you know, is where the project manager and the functional manager share power equally. When you share power with someone equally, it stands to reason that you must negotiate and be in good relations with that person for the both of you to take that project to a successful conclusion. Now, we need to understand that projects do not always go as planned. Hiccups occur during execution, and our ability to pivot, to tweak, or redress our plans of actions can determine if we can deliver the project according to earlier prescribed baselines. In essence, we must be ready to level resources as needed while we are in the implementation trenches. Some of the techniques available to us include fast tracking, which is where we execute numerous tasks at the same time, and crashing, where we apply more resources to a task to bring it to a speedier conclusion. There are times you might also need to adjust during implementation. We can also do the following. We can change the task list of the over-allocated person. What do I mean by that? If somebody is overburdened with a lot of work, you can go ahead and change the list of tasks they have. You might not reduce the number of tasks, but you might ensure that the tasks you give them take less time to get done. You can also change the work schedule of the resource person. Some people work better at night. Some people work better on weekends, okay? So you find out the peak work time of your people and ensure that they have quiet and a conducive atmosphere to get your work done at those peak times. You can also decrease the amount of work assigned to the resource person. If they're inundated with work, you want to reduce the amount of work you give to them so they can get it done. You can also delay a task that's been assigned to an over-allocated resource person, especially if there's a slack on it, 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You can delay it for 2 or 3 weeks, give them time to finish another task, and then get back to that original task. Or you can just assign additional resource persons to the task. All right, now we've looked at resource leveling, the basis of resource leveling. Let's delve a little bit more into fast tracking. Let's look at things from the fast tracking perspective, okay? The fast tracking process begins with identifying tasks that can be performed simultaneously. This translates to tasks that do not lie along the critical path. Once this is done, you want to assign these tasks to team members who can work the prescribed number of hours on them without undermining the progression of other concurrent tasks. There might be cases where a critical task might be on the list of tasks to be executed concurrently. We should ensure, in this case, that the speed of performance, and now we're talking about schedule, time, the cost of performance, which is the cost of budget, and the expected outcome, which is often quality and scope, are not impaired due to lower productivity caused by shared resource personnel. We should also be ready to provide oversight through sustained communications and transparency amongst assigned personnel. Keep everyone involved informed. Make yourself available to your subject matter experts, and yet be distant enough so you're not micromanaging them. If fast tracking is not enough to accomplish the quickened schedule, be ready to crash the process so critical tasks are not placed at the risk of schedule or cost slippage. How do we crash the process? We begin by first analyzing and estimating the probable effects of applying additional resources to the project. We should be mindful that additional resources cost money. This means that crashing is definitely more expensive, but does shorten the task duration time. We should then identify idle resource persons in other task assignments that have some slack, and then reassign them to the urgent task for at most the duration of the slack available. We should be careful not to take resource personnel away from their original tasks for longer than the available slacks in their initial task assignments. For example, activity D has a slack of 3 weeks. So we must not reassign its resource personnel for more than 3 weeks. Now, note that the decision to crash a task can be favorable if money is not of great importance to the client. The schedule or quality is. But be careful again to balance the time savings with the costs associated with the crashing exercise. You got to identify a point where you got to stop throwing resources and money at the task. A combination of crashing and fast tracking techniques will lead to adjustments during implementation. This is known as resource leveling. Now, to briefly demonstrate the concept of resource leveling, the main rule that governs resource leveling is ranking. When there are concurrent or parallel tasks, such as tasks B, C, D, for example, you select task C first because it has a minimum slack, which is 0, a critical activity. Remember, a critical activity is one that doesn't have room for hanky-panky, doesn't have room for playing. You've got to get it done when it should be done. You don't have 1 week to play with, 2 days to play with, 1 hour to play with, okay? So when you have 3 tasks that are in series with each other, you want to select that task first and get it done. So in the case of our example, you want to select task C first because it has a minimum slack. After that, you select task B, which has a slack of 2, which is lower than task D's slack, which is 3. Task D, therefore, will be the last of the 3 tasks to be resource leveled. Now, if for any reason the slacks are the same, we should break the tie by selecting the task with a shorter duration. All right? Because if you have a task that can be done in 2 days, you have another one that can be done in 5 days, you want to go ahead and finish the one that can be done in 2 days, get a result and an outcome out, focus on the outcomes, and then you get back to the one that can be finished in 5 days. Now, if there's yet another tie, okay, we break it by selecting the task with the lower activity identification number. In this project, activity E should be resource leveled before activity G. Activity E should be resource leveled before activity G. You can see that they have the same slack. If you look at E and G, they have the same slack, which is 2 weeks. But activity E has a shorter duration, 3 weeks, than activity G, which has a 5-week duration. From these explanations, resource leveling this project means that we should perform these tasks in the following sequence: activity A, activity C, then B, then D, then F, then E, then G, H, I, J. And as you can see there, I call them first, second, third, all the way to 10th. All these decisions are based on the assumption that we have one resource person per activity and that they're only available for a defined number of hours per day. There can be cases where there are more than one resource person per activity. For example, 2 resource persons who are flexible and available. So we can do another permutation that frees up more resource persons for other projects. I have taken the liberty of performing new forward and backward passes and calculating new slacks based on this assumption of 2 available, flexible personnel per activity. As you can see, there's a small circle at the center of each activity, and you can see the numbers 2 there. That 2 tells you that there are 2 people assigned to that activity. This network diagram now shows that there's more slack per activity. I've done that calculation all the way, forward pass, backward pass, calculating the slacks, okay? So it shows now that there is more slack per activity, except for activities I and J that now have 0 slack. And the durations for each activity have considerably reduced. Let's look at that. A closer look at this network diagram shows that the former durations are in black font. Remember, the durations are at the bottom center of each block, okay? So the former durations are in black font, while the new durations based on the resource leveling we've just done are parenthesized in green font. If you look at that now, you see that activity J that was to be concluded in 5 weeks can now be concluded in 1 week. And likewise, activity F that was to be concluded in 6 weeks can now be completed in 1 week. If you look through all the activities, you find that they are either completed at the said time or at a less time as soon as you do your resource leveling. And this is just with two resource personnel per activity. I know it's getting more complicated, right? So let me share my final quote for the day with you. I hope it encourages you to take the next step. A famous leader once said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step." So here's the deal for our next steps. KDE leadership has prepared a deep dive class to go into this in more detail and to hold your hand to create your own project network diagrams and their subsequent resource leveling models. As you can see on this screen, the 2 links show how you can be a part of this class next week. It's a 90-minute session comprising of a 60-minute segment where I take you through this process again, this time step by step, and we're going to do those calculations. I want you to understand them. And then there's a 30-minute segment where you get to ask your questions and receive guidance where you might have some difficulties, any or none at all. So in essence, I will say that this deep dive session costs only $89. So you want to go to the link above to grab your seat. And you will learn, as I said, how to create your own network diagrams. Identify the critical paths for your complex projects and level your resources during implementation. And as you saw from our demo, you can with the same number of resource personnel, reduce your duration times by up to 80% if applied correctly. Incredible, isn't it? Due to the fact that today's participants are from all over the world, with the attendant time zone issues, we've decided to facilitate this training 3 times within the coming week. All right, here are the details. For our North and South American participants, the date and time is Monday, 25th September 2023 at 6 p.m. Eastern, which is our local time. And for those in the West Coast, it's 3 p.m., but at least most of us will be able to attend if you are in North America, South America, Canada. For our Asian and Mid-Eastern participants, the date and time is Thursday, 28th September 2023 at 10 a.m. Eastern. Okay, we're targeting so people will be able to attend about 5 or 6 o'clock their local time. That's really what the math is. And finally, for our European and African participants, the time and date is Saturday, 30th September 2023 at 7 a.m. Eastern. I'm giving these times in Eastern, but they're actually very convenient times in those time zones. You will also get the video of a 90-minute presentation for your records as well. Now, I want to use this opportunity to showcase some of our other offerings for those leaders who might want their team members trained in proper project oversight procedures and techniques. The first one, as you can see on the screen, is what we call the Project Management Knowledge, Skills, and Attitudes. We call them KSAs. Okay, you want to see the link, and the cost is $1,000 per team member. The second training program that we have for advanced project managers is the Project Management Software Training with emphasis on Concept Draw Office. You want to see the link as well, and the cost is $3,000 per person or $15,000 per group of team members. Like say your office wants to present this, train your people on how to utilize the Concept Draw Office. Okay, it's a group, it doesn't matter how large it is, it's one presentation. So you can also get that going forward. Now we focus on Concept Draw Office. This is not the forum to tell you what that software does, but basically I can just say that it leads you through brainstorming, to mind mapping, to putting together a project document at the click of a button, and then presenting to your team or your stakeholders out there, either through a PowerPoint, Twitter, whatever the case may be, whatever platform is available or is acceptable to them. So it's a software that allows you to be a one-man or one-woman riot squad, okay? You're able to handle things yourself with your team members actually collaborating with you in real time and being able to make inputs into the planning sessions and the execution sessions, regardless of regardless of what part of the world they're resident or they're operating from. The third thing I want to do here is I'm also going to show you the Project Management Office setup and training. Again, you want to see the link, and the cost is $7,500 per organization. So for those who want to set up a PMO in their offices to handle their portfolios, their programs, and their projects, we can do it for you or show you how it's done. I'd rather show you how it's done so you don't come back to me and get charged some money again. All right? Having said that, finally, the KDEL annual coaching subscription is the final thing I want to show you here. It gives you access to me for a full year. This means 24 meetings a year, and you get to be trained in all the programs that we have. Again, you want to see the link here, and the cost is just $1,250 per month for 12 months. All right, in this case, you have access to everything that KDEL has to offer, okay, from team dynamics to doing more with less, whatever the case may be, intrinsic motivation, change management, you have access to that going forward. We meet twice a month, 24 meetings a year. We can guide you to your next level. Now, I'm showing you the most effective project management related training program right now, which is the deep dive that I mentioned earlier. I want you to go ahead and use the link on the slide to book your spot for only $89 and select any one of the sessions we have listed. Monday, 25th September at 6 p.m. Eastern for our American, Canadian, and South American participants. Thursday, 28th September at 10 a.m. Eastern for our Asian and Mid-Eastern participants. And Saturday, 30th September at 7 a.m. Eastern for our European and African participants. I want to use this opportunity now to let you know that I have a leadership book that's just been published. You can download my new book on Amazon using the first link on this slide in red. You can go ahead and take a screenshot of that if you want to, or just search for me on Amazon. The book is right there. The book is called Big Dreams, Making It Happen for Organizations and Teams. Let me say that again, Big Dreams, Making It Happen for organizations and teams. For the deep dive session, you can book your spot by clicking on the second link there in blue, which is kdleadership.com/products-KPMNR, KPM as in Mary, N and R. You can also book a meeting with me or sign up for the 1-year subscription on any of the 2 links below the deep dive link. From the KDEL team, this is Dr. KD thanking you for spending the last 1 hour with me. I do hope you got some advanced network diagramming and resource leveling tips from this exercise. And I look forward to really diving deeper into these topics with you next week. Cheers, everyone. Be safe. And until next week, bye for now.